guys, welcome back to Honey in the Rock, episode 72. I'm Sophie, and this is Mattie.
Hi.
So I met Mattie on my mission trip to the Dominican Republic. She was kind of like the big sister of the trip, and that's where we met.
Yeah.
And then just kind of been like praying about who to have on as a guest, and she was so quick that I was like, I need to ask Mattie because like you really are like a ray of sunshine. That's what everyone was saying at the trip. It was so encouraging each night. We would just like go around and like honestly just like kind of shout each other out. But that's what everyone would say about Mattie was like, she's a ray of sunshine. She's just this type of thing, and she really is. It's like draw to you, like people draw to you. I drew to you because you're like feel safe. So I'm excited for people to hear from you.
Well, it was amazing to meet Sophie as well, and Macy and everyone of course. But we were the like younger crowd, the younger ones in the crowd too.
With ones without the couple.
Yeah, we weren't coupled up.
Coupled up there.
Everyone was amazing, but we were the younger ones of the crowd, so I think we really held our way down.
So fun, yes. And so we're just gonna get right into it. What is your testimony?
So it's interesting because I was speaking of the DR, telling Sophie that coming back from the DR, we talked a lot about, this overwhelming presence of just the Lord and everything that we do. And coming back from that, I, was really trying to be intentional about that coming back home and in the ways that I could practice that and fulfill that and feel that same feeling living my everyday life.
Right.
But one of the things that had been weighing on my heart was that I had never really shared a testimony before. I'd grown up in the church. I've always been a part of the church, I would say. Always been someone who's been deemed a Christian, a faithful person, but it just never something that I had felt the right time and place. And then it been weighing on my heart. And then not just a few weeks later, Sophie reached out to ask and kind of mention that was a part of it. Right. So appreciative of her.
And that part, like, you haven't even told anything yet, but that was my like big idea of starting the podcast was like, if I'm having this podcast, I would like them to share their testimony. Yeah. Because I think there's sweetness in being vulnerable and also for people to know. Like, why would people take your advice if they don't know you? Yeah. And then I also think God can do really cool things through our stories. So
absolutely.
And connect people. Like you build connections that you didn't know you had with people who might not even be similar to you at all because of things that like you've been through and the Lord has shown up to.
Yeah. I would say, too, it's interesting. I think, and we can talk on this later, too, but after the DR was really a time I had felt his presence and, like, the Lord talking to me to be like, it all makes sense to you now. Like, everything I'm about to share after this experience, although over, my whole life, really, and all the things that we'll get into, that was the time I was like, oh, it clicked. Yes, like, I get it now. I see it. I feel it. I want to tell it. So perfect timing with that. So I guess just
Which is a cool thing that comes with serving the Lord.
Yes.
Like, we serve thinking we're giving something, but we're really just receiving something. And
I walked away feeling like some of these darkest moments I thought I'd never get through. Now I'm experiencing these highest of highs, and I would have never experienced that. So I would say, like I mentioned, I've always grown up in the church. I grew up in a Presbyterian church. I did all the things from the Sunday schools to the baptism, Sunday schools, confirmations. My parents have always been amazing spiritual leaders. They have served in all capacities at the church, which I think is really inspiring to really always make time for, no matter how busy your life is. They may have had a million things in the week, but they've done new members, they've done deacons, they're currently elders, they've served multiple terms on all of those things, just great servants of the Lord. Yeah. So I would say I definitely always have had a relationship with God for sure. But I also think on a more personal side of, in the way that he created me, one of the things that is a blessing and a curse at times is I've always been a really committed person to whatever I'm doing. So I think I came out of the womb kind of a natural leader. Some may say bossy, but
take it what you want.
Take it how you will. I say leader, you say bossy. But no, in a positive manner, just super committed to everything I've ever done. So whether that be school or dance or cheer or faith or whatever, if I was doing something, I was doing it 1,000,000%. Yeah. So which is interesting because one of my favorite Bible verses is Ecclesiastes 9:10, which says, whatever your hands find to do, do it with all your might. Yeah. And that's been, my favorite Bible verse for forever. Right. But I think it's because it relates to me so much. I'm doing that constantly. However, that verse goes on to talk more about how when you're doing God's will, when you're doing that, you have this fulfillment and this overwhelming joy. And I wasn't always doing that.
Right.
I will share. But yeah, so definitely had been super committed to my faith forever. But like I said, that comes with a lot of pressure too.
Right.
And a lot of self-worry of who am I going to fail today? Am I going to be good enough? Am I going to achieve this goal I've set for myself? And so towards the end of senior year, this experience of life we were just talking about, you're kind of coming into that shift of life where everything you've been committed to for so long is kind of wrapping up, and then you're starting this next adventure.
Yes.
And during that season, like I said, I had been cheer captain for 4 years at my high school. I was finishing out, I'd been dancing since I was 2 years old, so finishing out my senior year of dance, hoping to go off to college and make a dance team. But that was huge. Even in dance, I was on our senior level team in 7th grade, always all those things. I was, fighting to be top of my class. I was student body president. I was probably in every club at school.
Yes.
And I'd been really committed to all those things, and super intentional in all those things. And, that definitely was starting to place my value in these things around me that I'm doing. And at that time, looking back now, had lost a lot of understanding of placing my value in him for sure.
Right.
So then come towards end of senior year, January before going this time of year, actually, I had a really significant injury. I basically blew out my entire knee. I tore my ACL, my meniscus, had a million cartilage tears.
Right. Oh,
so although, we all have injuries all the time, this for me was, I didn't get to finish anything.
No.
Everything that I'd worked so hard for my life to do and be and define myself by, I didn't get to finish any of that. And it was at that time that I honestly just didn't know what to do with myself.
No.
And I didn't place my stressors or my questions or my angst or anything. I was not seeking the Lord at that time. And that led to a series of just horrible decisions, bad decisions, mistakes, one thing after another, kind of just spiraling downhill. And although at the time I didn't realize how my lack of intention with my relationship with God, how my placing so much value in the things that defined me externally, this injury that took away so much from me, definitely didn't see the religious component of it. I just thought man, this sucks. I've lost literally everything. I'm not going to get to go into college the way I thought I would. I'm not getting to finish everything that I've literally given my whole life to at that point. And I, for the first time in a really long time, kind of got to be, I guess, a normal teenager. I had free weekends. I started to go to parties. I started to drink.
You had freedom.
And I was, everything that had kept me so tightly wound and on the right path was gone. And so that really that spiraled a lot. I continued to kind of go through the motions, but really my relationship with God was not present at all. I had no relationship with him, if I'm being honest. My relationship with my family was tumultuous because of these decisions I was making. I thought what I was surrounding myself with was bringing me happiness and, allowing me to cope. But it wasn't. I was just fulfilling a void based on what the enemy was putting into my head. So I go off to college. I think this is going to be a fresh start, and kind of the same things just start to happen. I feel like I can't. I went through sorority recruitment, and I didn't feel good enough in that. I was trying to find. I didn't know anyone at Clemson, being an out-of-state student. I was trying to find friends, and I used to have 1 million friends, and that is constantly putting yourself out there. And like I said, just still making horrible decisions. And it got so bad to a point where I was just in such a dark place that I did not want to live anymore. I was just so overwhelmed with the enemy and the darkness and, all these things that I thought would make me feel better, but was really just making me feel sinful and guilty. And so I did try to end my life. And I will never forget just kind of being where I was. I mean, it's a moment I'll never forget, of course, but a place there too. And for people that I have shared this story with, they always ask like, what like made you,
right.
like, how did you get out of that? Like, what did you, and at times I've definitely just said like, oh, I just knew that wasn't it. But,
right.
now I look back and like, that was God talking to me.
Right.
Like,
yes.
He was there in my ear saying, this is not your story. Like, you have done wrong, but like, I will pull you out of this.
Yes.
Like, you need to call for help and we will work on this together.
That's so
and still that next day I woke up in a hospital room alone. And even though in that moment, like, felt so alone, I was thinking like, where are the people that love me?
Right.
But now when I look back on it, I think like it was time for me, and that was time for me and him to wrestle through some things, and figure that out.
Yes.
And I think that experience, like I said, although I had been faithful ever until then, I look back now and I see the value in how I didn't have a relationship with him. He was there. I was a Christian.
Right.
I still believed, but I know I wasn't making an effort. I wasn't making good decisions. I wasn't living as a Christian. I wasn't talking to him about these struggles I was going through. I was just constantly letting the enemy overrun all of my thoughts. And I would say that, although, like I said, not my story, not my testimony, the fact of like reevaluating the value it is to have an intentional relationship with him, to place him at the forefront, is kind of what led me now into where I sit side by side with Jesus, like going through every day. And don't get me wrong, it's still a struggle. I still wrestle constantly with, this guilt I have of the decisions I made and the things I did and the way I treated people. And, then, I have people, that are like, you're such a light, you're so joyous. And I'm like, yeah, but it came from a really dark place at one time.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts, but thank you for sharing all of that. I think there is such beauty in, like we said, in being vulnerable, but then also in have been in the dark and then to see the light again. It's like, oh, this is special. And so I think that's really cool. And then the idea of putting our identity in everything and all of these other worldly things. And technically, they're not all bad things. School isn't a bad thing. Doing cheer isn't a bad thing. For me, running wasn't a bad thing. Like, these outside, quote unquote, worldly things don't have to mean it's bad.
No.
But if your full identity is found in those, and a quick injury strips it all away. The season ending strips it all away. Going to college strips it all away. Having a kid might strip it all away. Like, whatever that looks like in your life, it's quickly stripped away. And then all of a sudden you realize your full identity was in that thing. And so I think even you sharing your story is a good reminder for me, and I'm sure the people listening, of just the idea of making sure that your identity isn't in everything of the world. You can enjoy things that God created, and it can be fun and it can be awesome. But if your personal relationship with Jesus isn't a priority, then it's going to be
none of it matters.
So hard.
No. None of it matters.
And I mean, after this first cross country season ended, I was like, what do I do with myself? Like, my pants don't fit. What does this mean? What's like these things like that of just like all of a sudden this like spiraling. But I'm like, whoa, I had too much of my identity found in this one thing that's temporary, because everything on this earth is temporary.
Absolutely.
And then I also think what's interesting is to see how you said in the hospital room when you woke up and you felt so alone, of like how many times we feel alone.
Yeah.
And as hard of a situation you were in, and in so many other situations, maybe your parents are going through a divorce, or maybe you're just like laying there hearing people yelling at each other and fighting, or maybe you're just like in college and you feel lonely in your dorm room. Like, whatever this alone feeling is, doesn't mean God walked away. It just means, what can you do to draw closer? And I think that's something I've had to also work on. Of like,
absolutely,
I feel alone, so what can I personally do to pull myself closer to the Lord? And maybe that's opening up my Bible, maybe that's turning on Christian music,
or Christmas, either one,
or Christmas music, or like talking to like a friend or someone who loves the Lord too. Like, what does that look like? And so I think it's really mature of you now to be able to look back and be like, the Lord just needed me with him.
Yeah, and He was there. The whole time. I look back now, I think about I'm gonna just get emotional talking about this. Like, I think about like my best friend and the very first like friend that I met at Clemson. We had barely known each other, and she is just someone who is so full of the Lord and always has been. And I think about how when I was going through that, like hearing him like, you need to find help, you need to seek help. This isn't it for you. She was the first person I called. We barely knew each other. She didn't know what she was getting herself into being my friend. But and when I look back at it now, I'm like, wow, like he was working in my life in a way, because if he hadn't placed someone like her who was so full of the Lord and confident and able to be a just sounding board of the Lord during a time where someone her own age was going through like the worst time, would I've ever gotten out of that, you know? And I think, like you said, like he's not walking away from us. So where do we get back on track? And I think since then it's led me to all the things now. Like don't get me wrong. Like there were times as a college student where I was still wrestling with my faith too, but now and moving into adulthood, and when I first moved to Greenville, like my very first thing was like, I have to find a church.
Okay, so my first memory of you, like I know we met.
Yeah.
And then like we saw each other in the meetings, that we had like meetings before the mission trip. And I kept thinking like, she's so cute, but it's just kept being my thought. But then like my first conversation I remember having with you on the trip was I don't even know if you were saying it to me or if you were saying it to somebody on the bus. I was so car sick that whole time.
That's right. So we were going through the mountains of the Dominican.
Yes, and I'm already car sick, and there's air conditioning.
Beautiful, and thankful for the experience, but we're like, I was so car sick.
And so I had my eyes closed the whole time, so I don't even know if you were talking to me or somebody, but the thing I heard you say was, well, the first thing I looked for when I moved here was a church. And that was so encouraging for me to be like, well, when I move to college soon, I need to first look for a church or whatever that looks like in the future. But just realizing that's where so much like fruit comes from, being in communion and relationship with fellow believers. And so I think that's so important. But then also with like the idea of the friend, like having a friend shows the importance of friendships, and having your close friends know the Lord and love the Lord, because you know there's a lot of people who saved me, a lot of friends who, hey, come on, let's go. Yeah. And, you know, your friend that saved you. And it's just interesting. And then, like, now we have the opportunity to be that friend. Yeah. Because Jesus is the ultimate friend and the ultimate, like, picture of a friend. Yeah. So I think it was really, like, really was, like, my first was like, oh, wait, to find a church first. Like, how important is that?
Yeah. It's hard. You know, I was young. I was fresh out of graduate school. I was excited to move to somewhere new, even though I'd just gone to school right down the road. Greenville was still a new place for me. My family, I didn't have any family around. Right. So, you know, it can be a little intimidating to go to a church by yourself, especially when you don't know anything about any of the 12 churches in a mile radius of downtown Greenville. But it was such a fulfilling time too. And you know, shared this on the trip too, you know, being able to I went to a bunch of different churches, started going to Buncombe Street because I'd recognized some familiar faces. Yeah. So, you know, being able to have that familiarity in a place that is so important to you immediately drug me in. And then I joined a small group, and, you know, that too was a little intimidating because I didn't know anyone, but, you know, here I am trying to make it a priority. Yes. And then I'll never forget, you know, just a few months after that, sitting in the church service, and they talked about the DR trip, and I was like, that sounds like a good idea. We left on my 25th birthday. I'd been saying I wanted to go on a trip for my 25th birthday. So I was like, well, this combines all of my favorite things of travel and the Lord and meeting new people.
Got a trip.
I mean, it sounds like it's perfect. So I just signed up on a whim, and ended up being, you know, just one of the best things. And then kind of what I had shared earlier, you know, was one of those coming back from that trip, reflecting on now the previous experience, life experience, getting into Greenville, starting this new chapter of life. I'm like, it all makes sense. Yeah. You know, he has led me exactly where I need to be. And it was one of those overwhelming moments of like, man, he's got me. Yes. He's got me. Yes. He's showing me. He's here with me doing it. And it's all going to just get better from here.
Yes. It really is sweet, and like the importance of getting plugged in, not just going to sit in the back of a church, which is also totally great. Like one step at a time. But then eventually to make sure you're plugged in is how you're going to, you know, make connections and feel loved and, you know, valued there, and be able to open up. Like eventually, like what are you going to do, stand up in the middle of a sermon? No, like, that's why you need a small group. And so it's just, like, sweet to see that. And, I mean, I kind of chose to go in the DR to live, too. Mason, do you want to go? I mean, yeah, sure.
Sure.
Like, we missed a week of school. Like, who cares? And so it was sweet, like, how everyone got there. What do you think? We kind of been talking about, like, at the end of the trip, it was weird to leave because everyone was so close. The episode I did with Jenny about this trip,
amazing person ever.
I forget what the word is.
Koinonia.
Yeah, I can't ever say it either.
Yeah.
But like the idea of like all of a sudden being so filled with spirit because so many people are around.
Like it's something you can't even explain.
No. And so it was so hard to be home. But then also it was so sweet because I had a new perspective on everything.
Yes.
And I will say my temper, like I had no patience for anything when I got home for the first week. Because people would say something, I'm like, yeah, no, like toughen up. Like, it's fine. And then obviously like
you get back into the swing. Yeah.
Yes. And like what I had to do was like, how do I learn how to live in America with what I've seen and what I've learned and what the Lord's put on my heart. And now it's been interesting to see like, okay, what are ways I can serve here? What are things I can do? How can I, live with that same boldness that we had there here too? But it really was interesting.
Yeah. I would say like when we came back, although a difficult transition, we talk about it, they prepare you for that, it also had me energized. I wanted to talk at Sunday school that day. I wanted to get up during church service. Like a lot of us sat together at church that I wanted to stand up and be like, we went to the DR, it was awesome. I wanted to start the Bible in a year plan that our church has been, really motivating everyone. Like I wanted to do everything, which you can't do it all at once, but having that kind of re-centered energy of where everything around me, I can find a place in this was awesome.
That is so cool. And it really was. It was a good recenter. And it was interesting because it was at a kind of weird time of the year. Was it November?
The first week in November.
Yes. And I'm it was kind of a weird time. It's not a refresh start. You're about to go into the busiest season. Of December.
Oh, yeah. I think we got back and we all were I remember sitting on the plane coming back into Greenville and I was like, oh my gosh, my calendar's so busy. God, please just bring peace over me right now.
Because it was such a drastic change. But I think obviously if you can't just get on a plane and go on a mission trip right now, what are things that you can do to recenter your life? And that's something we found in this mission trip. But then now that I'm here, it's okay, maybe that's going to a coffee shop on Sundays and just spending time in the Word and writing a plan for the week. Or just what does it look like to recenter and refocus? It's something I really learned.
Yeah.
Okay, switching gears a little bit. Actually, no. What's something that you I want to one more thing about the DR.
Actually, no.
I can't
we could talk about it forever. I know. I feel like my conversations are always going back there.
So the DR did this. Yeah. What's the biggest thing that you think you learned there, or just something that you just loved?
Yeah, I would say there's a million things. 100%. I mean, there's this opportunity to be fully servant of the Lord. This opportunity to be away from your home. This opportunity, to get to know a new culture and community and be so immersed in that community. So many amazing things. For me personally, though, definitely the community that I walked away with from our church. And just some of the community and the way that we've stayed in touch with some of the people that we met in the DR as well. I talked a little bit about this on, I think one of our last days, I did my morning devotion as we split it up all the way. And I just talked a lot about, Jesus has the power. He had the power to do everything here on earth, but, he chose to have discipleship in that. And he chose to surround himself and use other people to, make the Lord's plan come to life. And walking away from the DR, I just felt so overwhelmed with knowing that no matter what happened in my life, I have a foundational friendship and love and connection with this group of people that I hadn't had before I came. And don't get me wrong, I loved the church I was going to. Was establishing relationships there, being there for that amount of time, what we were doing, that connectedness is something you can't really explain or replace. And I'm just so thankful for that, even coming back here and keeping up relationships and seeing people at church and, making time to meet one-on-one to talk about whatever it may be in life. That was the Lord's work, and that part of life for me was really powerful. And being in a newer city and trying to place roots here, alone in a lot of it. But for coming back, I was I'm not alone anymore. Not that I've ever been alone when you have God on your side, but
have like physical community,
but also community that I know that will help me grow in my faith as well.
Right.
So something super important at my age of life where everyone's life looks a little different.
Yes. And it really was sweet. Like, I don't even go to the church that we traveled with. Like, I have a great church with great community. And it was sweet to see that there was also community other places.
Yeah.
Like it gave me confidence almost. I have such a good community at my church that people will, do whatever. We're there for each other. But then it was sweet
to see that that's like working in our hometown. Yeah.
Yes. And then how everyone welcomed me, and even though I didn't go to the church. But it also was sweet. Like, it was good. It was really cool for me and Macy to go together because, like, what two friends
powerful for your friendship,
But then also it was so sweet to like see marriages. I think you talked of like to see these marriages serving together was so sweet. And then there was like older couples, and it was sweet to see them there. And then there was like you there, and like you could have been doing whatever else you wanted. You're like you're just like single, doing whatever, like grown adult. Like you're not
trying. I'm a fake adult.
Like you really could have done whatever. So it was like encouraging to see that. And so it was just like really
we had a lot of different facets of life there, which was cool to kind of see still how everyone could come together for the same mission.
And I've always been on youth trips.
Yeah.
So it's like me and the people.
And the perspectives that you hear from there.
So cool. And so I think community was something like I learned there as well. And then seeing what it looks like here now. Like, how can the listeners or even us, like, what does community look like in everyday life?
Yeah.
And I think that's been encouraging. Okay, now I'm switching gears.
Okay.
You were, at Clemson, what was your team called?
Oh, the dance team?
Yes.
Yeah, it's the Rally Cats, the dance team, yeah.
So, when I was just like kind of thinking about like when you kept talking about that, was there ever like temptation in like being in the spotlight so much of like letting either pride come in or even the complete opposite of just like hating on yourself so much? Like everyone's looking at you or, oh, that girl looks like that or this girl looks like that. Like, did you ever have any like sort of struggles with that? And then if you did, what did it look like kind of to
navigate that?
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I think on both ends of the spectrum, definitely when you are placed in the spotlight so much on whatever stage it may be or whatever capacity it may be, you always have this. And kind of like I said to the beginning, like something I've struggled with, I feel like my entire life. Am I going to be good enough? Am I going to be fit enough? Am I going to be pretty enough? Am I going to be, just like all of those things. But then also too, when you do constantly are placed on a stage in that capacity, learning to figure out where, that's not all me. Like, God has given me all these amazing opportunities. He's given me all these amazing resources. Like, He has led me to this point. It's like how to take that and use that to my best and my value. And I would not say I was someone who always did that. I mean, I loved being in the spotlight. Like, don't we all in some capacity? And like, am I always being, my letting the Lord shine through me in those spotlights at times? Probably not. Definitely not in some capacities. I hope moving forward, if ever on in the spotlight again, and like we said, any stage, I always allow that to be for Him to shine through me in everything that I do. And I think that's something that I've prayed a lot about more recently in life, in navigating that. So hardships on both, and just like you said, when you go somewhere so dark, and you come out of it, you definitely have some. It's hard to not go back there at times, but when you start to be intentional about something like a relationship with the Lord or the people that you're surrounding yourself about, like after that, I'm like, I can get through it. He will guide me through it. It may not be fun. It may not be easy. No. It probably won't be easy. Actually, there is no guarantee that. There's no guarantee that I won't face darkness again. Right. But I will never not know the relationship I have with Him now again.
Yeah. That's so cool.
So,
I had just been kind of thinking about that because of different things that, like, even opportunities, because the opportunity you had to be on that team at Clemson is so awesome. And it doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but just like different opportunities that's come up in my life. And it's like, okay, how do I purposely set my mind on being in the spotlight, but it's not about me?
Yep.
And it's such a hard thing. So I was just like wondering, because like, not to make myself feel better, but like,
no,
it's a struggle too.
No, it's hard.
It really is. It's so interesting. And how we're wired almost. It's like the worldly thing of we get praise and we want that. Like, but then what does it look like to humble myself at the feet of the Lord and be like, yeah, I'm yours.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's great that you're even mindful of that, because I would say I have not always been mindful of that, and something I battle with every day, like figuring out every day.
Yeah. And it's because I wasn't mindful of it, and then I stumbled and fell on my face.
Yeah.
Not literally.
And then you're like, okay.
And then I'm like, okay, I have to be mindful of this, which is interesting of how the Lord does that. Like the timing of it, of like, He teaches you, and sometimes you fall, and then it's like, okay, I need to be aware of what I'm doing now. This
Absolutely.
has been such a good conversation.
Yes.
I feel like if you're watching, I didn't have much of a plan going into this, which I normally do, but just like I feel like the overall view is just like the importance of community and that personal relationship with Jesus, because that kind of is fed into everything we talked about. Like your testimony to the Dominican, to being on team, like whatever it looks like, the importance of community, and but then also like at the center of it all, having that personal relationship with Jesus.
Yep, and that's something I hope I continue, and hope we all continue and can inspire to do, because it's amazing to talk about it with the people. It's amazing to like practice it in servant areas. It's amazing to do all those things. But I'm telling you, there's like no more time I feel more connected when I'm like by myself, one-on-one, talking to him, or at the altar, just me and him praying, even though there's 1,000 people around, or even on times in our trip, when I would take some quiet time just to seek him, and or driving in the car or wherever it may be,
anything,
just like seeking that one-on-one time with him is.
And the sweetness of that is like we don't do it alone.
Yep.
We have the Holy Spirit to do with us, and through prayer, like, hey Lord, like help me stay devoted to you, help me do that, and which is so interesting, like neat and cool that Lord did that, like
powerful.
So powerful.
He takes a step down from this, kind of overarching like pedestal we place him on, but he still takes the time to step down and be one-on-one with us, which is like, what is it, transcendentalism? He's with everyone but with us at the same time.
I'm like,
super powerful. Makes you take a step back and you're like,
okay, I'm so small.
So small, but you still make the time for me. Like, how awesome is that?
Right. And like, we serve a God that does that. Like,
chooses to do that.
Like he doesn't need us to do anything, but he chooses, and there's something sweet in that, and like,
and a safe feeling with that.
So safe.
A safe that through whatever may come, past, present, future, he's on our side.
Sweet. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
I love you. You're so good. Okay. Well, thanks y'all. Thanks y'all for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye.